morning of March 15th started like any other at Meridian National Bank's downtown branch. Senior teller Margaret Chen arrived at 7:30 a.m., coffee in hand, keys jingling as she approached the employee entrance. The familiar weight of her security badge felt reassuring as she swiped it through the electronic reader, hearing the satisfying click of the lock disengaging. But something felt wrong the moment she stepped inside. The vault door stood wide open. Not partially ajar, not cracked, completely open, like a gaping mouth revealing rows of empty cash drawers. The thick steel barrier that protected millions of dollars in currency, bonds, and precious metals hung motionless on its massive hinges. The vault's interior lighting cast eerie shadows across the marble floor, creating an almost theatrical scene of violation. In 11 years of working at Meridian National, Chen had never seen the vault open before management arrived. She called out for James Callahan, the night security guard. No response echoed through the marble corridors. The building felt hollow, abandoned, filled with an unnatural silence that made her skin crawl. Chen's hands trembled as she fumbled for her phone and dialed 911, her voice shaking as she reported what would become one of the most sophisticated bank heists in American history. Within minutes, police cars flooded the tree-lined street outside Meridian National. Detective Ray Morrison, a 20-year veteran of the force with graying temples and tired eyes, surveyed the vault with growing bewilderment. No signs of forced entry, no shattered glass, no bent metal, no evidence of explosives or power tools. The sophisticated alarm system showed active status throughout the night. Green lights blinking normally, no breach alerts recorded in the digital logs. "Where's your night guard?" Morrison asked bank manager Patricia Williams, who had arrived moments after the police, her usually perfect composure shattered by the magnitude of the crisis unfolding in her institution. "James should still be here," Williams replied, checking her watch with increasing anxiety. "His shift doesn't end until 8. He's never left early without authorization." But James R. Callahan was nowhere to be found. His security uniform hung neatly in his locker, pressed and ready for the next shift that would never come. His time card showed a normal logout at 4:06 a.m., 2 hours early, but not unprecedented for quiet nights when protocols allowed guards to secure the building and leave early if no suspicious activity occurred. Everything appeared routine except for one devastating detail. $12.6 million in bundled cash had vanished without a trace. The man behind the badge. James Robert Callahan seemed like the last person anyone would suspect of orchestrating one of the decade's most audacious bank heists. At 48, he embodied the stereotype of a reliable, unremarkable security guard. Medium height at 5'9", thinning brown hair that he kept meticulously combed, wire-rimmed glasses that gave him an accountant's demeanor rather than a criminal's edge. His handshake was firm but not aggressive, his voice measured and polite in the way of men who had learned to blend into institutional backgrounds. His employment file at Meridian National painted the picture of an ideal employee. 11 years of service without a single disciplinary action, commendation letters from supervisors, perfect attendance records that spoke to an almost obsessive dedication to duty. Former Army sergeant with an honorable discharge after 8 years of service, including 2 deployments to Afghanistan where he'd earned a Bronze Star for meritorious service under enemy fire. 2 children, Emily, 16, and Marcus, 14, both honor roll students who lived primarily with their mother following their parents' acrimonious divorce. Until recently, he'd been married to Linda, a registered nurse at the local hospital who worked the night shift in the emergency department. Their marriage had lasted 18 years before falling apart under the accumulated stress of financial pressures, conflicting work schedules, and Callahan's increasing withdrawal from family life. The divorce had been finalized just 8 months earlier, leaving him bitter, isolated, and financially devastated. Colleagues at the bank described Callahan as quiet, dependable, almost invisible in the way that long-term employees often become part of the institutional furniture. He never called in sick, rarely took vacation days, and often volunteered for extra shifts during holidays when other guards wanted time with their families. He knew every inch of the bank's layout, every protocol, every weakness in their security infrastructure, with the thoroughness of a man who had spent over a decade studying the same environment. "Jim was the guy you could count on," said fellow guard Robert Torres, a heavy-set man in his 50s who had worked alongside Callahan for 7 years. 15 minutes before his shift started, he was already in uniform, reading incident reports from the day shift. Never complained, never caused trouble. Hell, I don't think I heard him raise his voice once in 5 years. He was like a ghost, there when you needed him, invisible when you didn't. That reliability, investigators would later realize, had been Callahan's greatest asset. His predictability made him invisible to surveillance systems designed to detect anomalous behavior. His dedication earned him trust from supervisors who stopped questioning his movements or activities. His insider knowledge made the impossible heist not just feasible, but elegant in its simplicity. Months in the making. The FBI's investigation, led by Special Agent Sarah Martinez, revealed that Callahan's plan had been months, possibly years in development. Digital forensics experts analyzing the bank's computer systems discovered subtle traces of reconnaissance that dated back nearly 18 months. Callahan had been methodically studying the bank's operations, memorizing patterns that others took for granted, identifying vulnerabilities that existed in the gaps between human oversight and automated systems. Security camera footage from previous weeks showed Callahan lingering in certain areas during his rounds, apparently familiarizing himself with camera angles and blind spots with the methodical patience of a professional intelligence operative. He'd submitted several maintenance requests for routine inspections of the vault area, requests that seemed perfectly legitimate given his security responsibilities, but gave him opportunities to examine the locking mechanisms up close without arousing suspicion. The maintenance requests revealed careful planning. 3 weeks before the heist, during a scheduled maintenance window when the vault's electronic systems were temporarily disabled for software updates, Callahan had removed a small but critical component from the vault's internal locking system. The missing piece, a titanium pin no larger than a pencil eraser, but worth millions in security, wouldn't prevent the vault from closing normally, but it would allow someone with the right knowledge to override the electronic locks using manual controls that most people didn't even know existed. Security experts later marveled at the sophistication of this sabotage. The pin's removal required intimate knowledge of the vault's mechanical systems, understanding of its electronic backup protocols, and precise timing to avoid detection during routine maintenance checks. Callahan had essentially created a backdoor into the most secure area of the bank while appearing to perform standard security duties. He'd also been studying the armored car delivery schedules with obsessive attention to detail, noting which days carried the highest cash volumes, which routes the drivers used, which times offered maximum cash reserves overnight. March 14th had been perfect. A large currency delivery that afternoon meant maximum cash reserves overnight, combined with the fact that his supervisor was attending a security conference in another state, leaving Callahan as the sole overnight security presence. The psychology of betrayal. Dr. Elizabeth Hartman, a criminal psychologist who consulted on the investigation, provided insights into Callahan's transformation from trusted employee to master criminal. His personnel files revealed a gradual deterioration in his personal life that coincided with increasingly cynical observations about his workplace treatment. James Callahan represents a classic case of what we call institutional disillusionment, Dr. Hartman explained in her report. He gave 11 years of faithful service to an organization that treated him as expendable. His salary remained stagnant while executives received bonuses. His responsibilities increased while his recognition decreased. His personal life collapsed while his professional identity remained tied to a job that offered no advancement, no respect, and no financial security. The divorce proceedings had been particularly brutal. Court documents revealed that Linda Callahan had accused her husband of becoming emotionally distant and financially irresponsible, claiming he spent more time at work than with his family, while earning barely enough to support their lifestyle. She received their house in the settlement, primary custody of their children, and substantial alimony payments that consumed more than half of Callahan's take-home salary. Co-workers later recalled subtle changes in Callahan's behavior during the months leading up to the heist. He'd grown more observant of bank executives' expensive cars and watches, making occasional bitter comments about salary disparities. He'd expressed frustration with security protocols that he considered inadequate, often pointing out vulnerabilities that management ignored due to cost concerns. Jim started talking about retirement more frequently, remembered Torres. He'd joke about needing a big score to afford retirement, or about how security guards like us would work until we died while the suits upstairs got rich. At the time, it seemed like normal workplace griping. Looking back, maybe he was telling us exactly what he planned to do. The night everything changed. Surveillance footage analyzed by FBI technical specialists would later show exactly how Callahan executed his plan with surgical precision. The timestamp showed 2:13 a.m. when he entered the vault area, the exact same time he always conducted his security rounds, maintaining the appearance of routine that would prevent automated systems from flagging unusual behavior. The bank's sophisticated surveillance network, ironically designed to prevent exactly this type of crime, became Callahan's unwitting accomplice. His 11 years of consistent behavior had trained the artificial intelligence monitoring systems to recognize his patterns as normal. When he deviated slightly from his usual routine, the variations fell within acceptable parameters established by his own historical data. Using his legitimate access codes, Callahan disabled the vault area's motion sensors during their program maintenance window, a feature designed to prevent false alarms during routine cleaning that occurred between 2 and 4 a.m. The system logged this as standard procedure, automatically generating paperwork that would explain the sensor deactivation to day shift supervisors. At precisely 2:27 a.m., he approached the vault door. Using his master key combined with the manual override made possible by the missing titanium pin, Callahan opened the massive steel barrier with movements so practiced they suggested he'd rehearsed this moment countless times. To any observer, human or electronic, it would have looked like a routine security check, indistinguishable from the thousands of similar checks he'd performed over 11 years. The cash removal took exactly 43 minutes, according to timestamps on internal security cameras. Callahan had strategically positioned industrial-sized duffel bags inside janitors' bins throughout the building during previous shifts, explaining their presence as part of enhanced cleaning protocols he'd recommended to management. Working systematically, he loaded bundle after bundle of currency, primarily hundreds and fifties, that would be easiest to transport and exchange, until he'd accumulated $12.6 million in negotiable bills. No weapons were used. No violence occurred. No alarms triggered. Callahan simply applied his intimate knowledge of the bank's systems to extract its most valuable contents as quietly as a surgeon removing a tumor, with the same methodical precision that had made him such a valued employee. The Vanishing Act. At 4:06 a.m., Callahan completed his final act as a Meridian National employee. He logged out using his standard time card, the electronic timestamp creating an alibi that would initially deflect suspicion. He changed from his security uniform into carefully chosen civilian clothes, dark jeans, a plain gray sweatshirt, running shoes that wouldn't attract attention, and walked out the employee exit he'd used thousands of times before. But instead of heading home to his modest apartment on Elm Street, a one-bedroom unit with mismatched furniture and overdue bills scattered across a card table that served as his desk, Callahan climbed into a yellow taxi that had been waiting at the corner of 5th and Main. The positioning was perfect, close enough to be convenient, far enough to avoid the bank's external surveillance cameras. The cab driver, later identified as Miguel Santos, a 42-year-old immigrant from El Salvador who worked nights to support 3 children, told police that a man matching Callahan's description had arranged the pickup 3 days earlier. The passenger had paid the $200 fare in cash and provided a false name, Robert Thompson, along with detailed instructions about timing and destination. He seemed nervous but polite, Santos told investigators through an interpreter, kept checking his watch looking around. But he tipped me an extra $50 and said he was catching an early flight for a business trip. I believed him. He looked like a businessman, not a criminal. The taxi's GPS system showed a direct route to Henderson Private Airfield, a small facility 20 miles outside the city that catered primarily to corporate jets and wealthy hobbyists who could afford private aviation. The drive took 38 minutes through mostly empty streets, with Callahan maintaining silence, except for occasionally asking Santos to maintain the speed limit exactly. Security cameras at Henderson Airfield captured Callahan's arrival at 5:12 a.m., wearing a surgical mask, baseball cap, and dark sunglasses that obscured most of his face. The disguise wasn't unusual in the post-pandemic era, and airport personnel paid little attention to another early morning traveler trying to maintain privacy. Airport manager David Chen, no relation to the bank teller who would discover the theft 3 hours later, confirmed that a man had chartered a twin-engine Cessna 421 the previous week, paying the $8,000 fee in cash through a series of money orders. Purchased at different locations around the city, the passenger had provided identification documents that appeared legitimate, but were later determined to be expertly forged. The flight plan listed Nassau, Bahamas as the destination, a logical choice given the Bahamas' reputation for banking privacy and limited extradition cooperation. But aviation authorities noted that the aircraft's transponder signal disappeared over international waters approximately 90 minutes after takeoff, suggesting either mechanical failure or deliberate deactivation. He knew exactly what he was doing, Chen told investigators weeks later, kept his head down, minimal conversation, had all his paperwork ready, professional, polite, forgettable, exactly the kind of passenger who doesn't draw attention. If I hadn't seen his picture on the news, I never would have remembered him. The hunt begins. By noon on March 15th, Meridian National's internal crisis had escalated into a federal investigation. Local police, quickly overwhelmed by the scope and sophistication of the theft, requested FBI assistance within 36 hours. The Bureau's Financial Crimes Division took immediate jurisdiction, recognizing the interstate implications of the aircraft's flight path and the international elements of Callahan's apparent escape route. Special Agent Sarah Martinez, a 15-year veteran of financial crime investigations with a master's degree in forensic accounting, took personal command of the case. Her team immediately began analyzing every aspect of Callahan's life, searching for clues about his destination, potential accomplices, and the methods he'd used to convert his military training into criminal expertise. This wasn't a crime of opportunity, Martinez explained to reporters during her first press conference. This was a meticulously planned operation executed by someone with extensive inside knowledge and significant advanced preparation. We're dealing with a very intelligent, very patient individual who spent considerable time studying our techniques for catching bank robbers. The investigation revealed disturbing gaps in Meridian National's employee screening procedures that had allowed Callahan to operate undetected for months. Despite handling millions in currency on a daily basis, security guards underwent background checks only every 3 years. Psychological evaluations were non-existent. Financial audits of employees' personal accounts were not conducted. Workplace satisfaction surveys had never been implemented, preventing management from identifying employees who might be developing grudges against the institution. Border Patrol agents at every major crossing received Callahan's photograph and description within hours of the FBI taking control of the investigation. International databases were updated to include his biometric information. Interpol issued a red notice placing him on their most wanted list. But weeks passed without a single confirmed sighting, despite the massive publicity generated by news coverage of the heist. The investigation generated hundreds of reported sightings across 6 continents, each requiring careful verification that consumed valuable resources while yielding no useful intelligence. A tourist in Argentina photographed a man resembling Callahan at a Buenos Aires cafe, but facial recognition software determined the subject was a local businessman with no connection to the case. A hotel clerk in Romania reported a guest who paid in American currency and seemed nervous about surveillance cameras, but investigation revealed he was a legitimate traveler afraid of credit card fraud. Electronic surveillance of his children's social media accounts and his ex-wife's communications yielded nothing useful. Linda Callahan cooperated fully with investigators, providing access to her phone records, email accounts, and financial transactions. She insisted that her former husband had made no attempts to contact her or their children since his disappearance, and polygraph examinations supported her claims. James was methodical about cutting ties, Linda told Agent Martinez during one of several interviews. Even before the divorce was finalized, he'd started emotionally distancing himself from Emily and Marcus. I thought it was depression from our marriage falling apart, but maybe he was already planning to disappear. He never talked about the future anymore, never made plans beyond the next few days. Despite an international manhunt involving dozens of agencies and expenditures exceeding $3 million, Callahan seemed to have vanished completely. The chartered aircraft remained missing, presumably crashed into the Atlantic Ocean or hidden at a remote airstrip beyond the reach of aviation authorities. No financial institutions reported suspicious large currency deposits that matched the stolen bill's serial numbers. No surveillance systems captured images that conclusively matched his appearance after the Henderson airfield departure. Theories abounded about his ultimate destination and survival strategy. Some investigators believed he'd fled to South America, particularly countries like Paraguay or Uruguay, where $12.6 million could provide a comfortable lifestyle indefinitely, and where limited extradition treaties made apprehension unlikely. Others suspected Eastern Europe, particularly nations like Moldova or Albania, where banking secrecy laws and systematic corruption created environments where questionable wealth attracted little official scrutiny.